The Greek battle in Zack Snyder's $337 million, immediately corrected by expert for just about every historical detail, complete fantasy. The realism in Zack Snyder's epic historical action movie is evaluated by a historian. Snyder's first feature-length movie was the 2004 remake of George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. His next two movies, 300 and Watchmen, adapted comic book series. This set the stage for Snyder directing Man of Steel and building the DC Extended Universe, featuring Henry Cavill as Superman Clark Kent, Ben Affleck as Batman Bruce Wayne, and Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman/Diana Prince. While directing Justice League, Snyder exited the project due to personal tragedy, and the movie changed significantly under Joss Whedon's direction. After years of fans campaigning for what was dubbed the Snyder Cut, Zack Snyder's Justice League was released on HBO's streaming service and showcased his previously unfulfilled creative vision for the story of DC's superhero team. More recently, Snyder has directed, written, and produced Netflix's Rebel Moon movies, which he hopes will become a full-fledged science fiction franchise. DC and Rebel Moon are not the only franchises he has worked on, though. A historian analyzes the realism of 300, Rise of an Empire. After the success of 300, a sequel, 300, Rise of an Empire, was released 8 years later. Snyder co-wrote and produced the sequel while Noam Muro directed it. The story sees the Greeks' war against Persia's King Xerxes, Rodrigo Santoro, continuing. Lena Headey, David Wenham, and Andrew Tiernan reprise their roles from the first film, while Sullivan Stapleton and Eva Green play new characters. Rise of an Empire's box office came to $337 million worldwide, compared to the first movie's $456 million, and was not as well received as its predecessor. In an insider video, historian Roel Koning-Nendik reviews the realism during Rise of an Empire's Battle of Marathon. He is critical of how the movie tries to show the Greeks winning via shock tactics, even though their tactics are not surprising. Koning-Nendik also takes issue with the inaccurate depiction of the armor and weaponry used by both the Greeks and the Persians. The only thing he is impressed by is how the scale of violence is portrayed, but the movie still receives a low score. Check out Koning-Nendik's comments below. They're supposed to have run from their camp into battle by running a mile across this plain. Now, many people question this for obvious reasons, and many people have questioned this for centuries. We don't really believe that people could run that far in full armor in the summer heat, and I think that's what they're kind of trying to convey, that the Persians were taken by surprise because the Athenians were advancing much faster and going straight into that fight. They're trying to convey this idea that the Athenians won the Battle of Marathon through shock tactics. The Athenians didn't attack them while they were disembarking. They encamped across from them in this plain and sat looking at each other for 10 days. This is such a bizarre way of depicting Greek equipment. We know very well what kind of equipment they would have carried because they kept on depicting it on all their art, and especially after this victory, they were very proud of depicting themselves the way they looked and depicting the Persians the way they had been defeated. They have little boss shields, which are wrong. The swords are accurate. That sword looks like a very good Greek sephos. But then they have double-headed axes. They have all sorts of random weapons that have absolutely no place in classical Greece. Greeks are heavy spearmen, double-grip shields, long spears, heavy armor. The Persians seem to be carrying the kopsh, which is an Egyptian sword. The Egyptians were a big part of the Persian navy, so you might have had some Egyptian Marines on board who may have carried these kinds of weapons. But if we assume this is a force of Persians, which the movie wants you to believe, then why are they carrying Egyptian weapons and not Persian ones? The ancient battle account actually does say that they pursued the Persians to their ships and they seized some of the ships. So they have these really broad gangplanks, which would have been really nice if they had those. I think that would have made things a lot easier. But as far as we know, embarking and disembarking from these ships is actually quite difficult because they're just sort of beached or just lying offshore. While this clip is working with a kernel of what we're told about the Battle of Marathon, basically everything you're seeing here is complete fantasy, so I would give it a 2 out of 10. One thing I'll give them is the sheer scale of the kind of violence happening in this battle is something that the Greeks themselves were already wanting to convey. They want us to know that this is a huge thing. Our take on Roll Koningdik's comments. Even though Zack Snyder didn't direct 300 sequel, the movie still features his penchant for slow motion, over-the-top action scenes, and a darker visual aesthetic. Just like in 300, there is largely an emphasis on style over substance through the lens of an underdog story in which the Greeks defend themselves against the tyrannical Xerxes and his forces. Historical accuracy was never the priority for Zack Snyder when making 300, and it should not be a surprise that it was not a priority in Rise of an Empire.